next, we have a presentation from an industry expert that will give us some insights about optimizing employee benefits and a focus on specific benefits that improve both employee well-being and organizational outcomes. Let's give a warm welcome to Senior Vice President, Value Advisory at Alight Solutions, Jazz Madan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I just realized that I'm one of the lucky ones right before lunch. So I'm going to try my best to keep this engaging and just make this more an interactive session. A bit of my background, Jazz Madan. I lead the value advisory and analytics function at Alight, responsible for defining and measuring value for our clients. What does Alight do? For some of you that don't know, we are in the business of benefits administration. We provide well-being solutions. We're fortunate enough to serve 50% of the Fortune 500 are our clients. On the personal side, we live in Woodbridge, Ontario, not too far away from here. And like any other Torontonian, we're a big Raptors fan and family, and those are my two kids. That was preseason, so we were just there a couple of weeks ago. Here's what I want to cover today, right? In this cost-constrained environment that we live in currently, there's a heavy focus, as you all are well aware, of benefit spend, benefit ROI. How do you measure ROI? How do you prove ROI? So I'm going to get a bit into value leakage. I'm going to get a bit into the concept of value leakage. Why do we see value leakage amongst our clients, and what can we do about it? We then focus on employee experience, where we see gaps, where we see opportunities around employee experience, connecting the entire experience. And last but not the least, we'll talk about value. How do you quantify, and then how do you prove value to your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, for an existing investment or for a new investment around employee experience. So let's get going around value leakage. What's the reality today? And when I talk about the reality today, this is more around what's been happening over the last couple of years. On the employee side, let's start about the employee side. Employee expectations have been increasing. Employees' expectation towards their employers are very different today than what it was probably 3 years ago, and we get a bit into that. So some recent studies around employee expectations. Just a year ago, around half of these employees' expectations was different what it was a year ago than what it is today. The other thing is to retain employees, they want a lot more in terms of benefits. They want a lot more comprehensive benefits. They want a lot more. There's a diverse population that you need to serve. Someone wants A type of benefit, whereas another person wants B type of benefit. So how do you juggle between those? So that's the dilemma that we face. Now let's get into it on the employer's side. On the employer's side, employers have always had the right intent, which is they want to drive better well-being for their employees. That's what employers have always wanted. They want to stay more competitive because employers are offering more programs. We want to recruit the best talent. We want to retain the best talent. So on the employer side, what we've been seeing is that employers do want to plan their benchmark against peers. Peers could be in the industry, peers could be in the market. So majority of them do want to plan and they do want to benchmark to stay competitive. The other thing is a heavy focus on the enhancing or adding new programs. Despite the cost-constrained environment, employers still want to enhance or add new programs, right? This is an ever-evolving phase. Before I get into the value leakage, I want to talk a bit about what those programs are. And this is not just a US problem, this is now becoming a Canadian challenge as well. Traditional benefits, it's our standard benefits that we all are well aware of, that we all have been offering. Beyond standard benefits, now there's this entire framework of benefits around physical well-being, family life well-being, mental and financial well-being. Now this is just an illustrative list. I bet there are a lot more programs out there that you're offering your employees. But the focus here is to talk to you about how complex it's getting. There's a lot more choices, a lot more programs, a lot more providers that are offering benefits. Before I get into what the value leakage is, quick poll, and I bet I know what the answer is here. How many of you have expanded your benefit stack over the last couple of years? probably 90%. So that's not uncommon, right? That's something that we've been seeing. But here's the challenge. The challenge is we all have expanded the benefits complexity. We're giving employees more choices, we're giving them more programs, we're giving them more experiences to deal with. At the same time, awareness and engagement continues to be low. Employees are not aware of their programs, then hence they're not utilizing their programs. The intent was to drive employee well-being, and that intent is not being fulfilled. Employee well-being still remains low, and these are all recent studies that prove the point. That's what we term as value leakage. The leakage between where you want to be when it comes to offering these programs and where your employees are not even using these programs, and that's the gap that we call as value leakage. Another poll, quick poll. How confident are you that your employees fully understand what you're offering to them? Let's start with the very confident folks in the room. Do we have any? Somewhat confident? All right, so probably around 40%. Not confident? All right, I'm sorry. That's around 60%. So that's a big number. So that's the challenge. So you all have a value leakage challenge that we're trying to solve for. So here's the experience gap. We get now into what the gap is and where we see as the opportunity. The onus is on the employee. As you add all these programs, the onus is on the employee to navigate through this complex ecosystem. The onus is not on the employer. The employer has offered these programs, but it's on the employee then to go figure it all out, which to me is broken. And that's what we need to try and solve for. I'm going to try and make this real. I'm going to take a real example here. I'm going to talk a bit about a use case here. Sarah, in this case, lives in Oakville. She is expecting and she's caring for a family member at the same point of time. Let's go through the journey, and I'm going to be pretty quick with regard to the journey because you guys would get the point. When we talk about she's aware that she's expecting, she connects with a family doctor, she connects with her OBGYN, but at the same time, she's not aware what the company has to offer. She's not aware that the company is there to support her as she goes through the journey. She's not aware of those pieces. We then get into, during the phase of, all the way from pregnancy to childbirth, she doesn't have access to the right set of programs. Company has programs to offer, but either she's unaware of it or, she's just not using it. And the rules are complex, right, as she goes through the journey. Life happens in parallel. It's not sequential. So she is also caring for a family member. She is not aware that her employer has benefits to offer, which can then help her with her aging parent. At the same time, she's planning for a leave. Now, while there's a leave process, it's a complicated process for her to go through, and the onus is on her to do the right paperwork, to reach out to the right folks to deal with the entire process end to end. Now that she's delivered, when she's back, there is sleep deprivation, there are challenges that she needs to overcome, and she's unsure where to go for help. When she returns to work, it's the same thing. She needs to be productive. She needs to be felt important and welcome back to work, and that may be happening or may not be happening in some cases. In parallel, she still needs to deal with her family member. So what this journey reveals is the following. The journey reveals that there are experience gaps here. Experience gap benefits exist, but employees don't know when or where to use them. High stress moments, we all deal with high stress moments, and we need help from the employer. At that point of time, even though the employer has provided the right set of solutions, they're not getting the necessary help that they need. And there's fragmentation. The entire employee experience is fragmented, as a result of which the employees, we're not driving the right outcomes that we intended to drive when we invested in these well-being programs. What's the impact? From a value perspective, the impact is higher value leakage. Benefit utilization is low, productivity is low, well-being, overall employee well-being is low, and in some cases there's a higher turnover. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve for. Now the opportunity, but before I get into the opportunity, there's obviously an AI component here. How many of you are leveraging AI in any capacity whatsoever to drive employee experience and to connect this disparate ecosystem. All right, so that's probably around 20 to 25% is where AI is being leveraged. That's awesome, right? I feel that if any one of us were to be on stage a year from today, that 25% is probably going to be 75%. And that's where the opportunity is. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. It's not just about AI, there's a human aspect to it as well. But there's a lot more that we all can do from an AI perspective. This is our point of view on with regard to how can you power that experience. It all starts with data. AI is as good as the data that feeds into it. We have different data sets within this entire HR benefits ecosystem. We have engagement data, we have experience data. Who's interacting, how are they interacting, what medium are they interacting with? Is it digital? Is it call center? That's all the engagement and the experience data. The next piece is around benefits and leaves. What are they enrolling in? Right? Where are they contributing? And things like that. On the leave side, what's the prevalence? What type of leave prevalence data, duration of leave? Those are the components. So there are those pieces around the administration. And then there's workforce and well-being, which is all the HRIS piece, and well-being data in terms of are they utilizing the programs that have been offered to them? If yes, what's the utilization and so on. So that's the data. The AI would help drive insights, recommendations, and actions in order to drive the employee experience forward. Having said that, it's not just about AI. We all need the human touch. We all need the white glove service, the concierge support as we go through this, as we go through critical moments in life. And that's when it is equally important to have that human piece of it, as whether it's customer care and benefits, whether it's you have the right set of guidance from a health and wellness perspective, through your core provider, through your ancillary providers, or whether it's financial and leave guidance. So that's what we're trying to solve for as organizations. We're trying to solve for how do you make it simple. This might sound more simple than it actually is, but how do you connect it all together while you offer the high touch piece of it? It's equally important to focus on the technology aspect. So let's get back to Sarah for a moment. What if it was an ideal world situation? What if, a year from today, 2 years from today, we all drive that experience forward? What would that experience look like? Let's start with the pre-moment when Sarah was aware that she's expecting. She gets onto a platform. She initiates a journey. What is a journey? It's a curated set of experiences. So she initiates that. And so it's the trigger is through Sarah, the recommended actions that start coming up as part of that journey. AI, now that AI has got involved, AI would surface to-dos, recommended actions, what to do, when to do it, would connect her with the right well-being programs. Caring for a family member, again, there's no way anyone's going to get to know that you're caring for a family member unless you initiate it. So she initiates the journey in this case, and then it directly connects her to the right level of support. On the leave side, because the process has already been initiated, there's a guided workflow in terms of connecting her to a leave expert going through the entire process. And then a couple of pieces at the end, AI would surface actions once she's back, whether it's on prioritizing her mental well-being, whether it's to-dos and reminders, or whether it is then caring for a family member and connecting her with the right providers that she has access through her employer. So what does that mean? Let's get into the value piece of it. From a value perspective, for Sarah, because she engaged in the right program, there was a value proposition. When each and every one of you bought the wellness programs, they had their own ROI. They had a value proposition. And that's the reason why you invested in those programs, whether it's a caregiving support program, whether it is a mental well-being program. So those were the levers, or those were the KPIs that then need to start getting measured. In this case, value for the employees, Sarah, her productivity is better, she has lower burnout, and she has a higher well-being. On the employer side, there's approximately $2,000 in total savings for her. Now, how does that number come about? Again, It's the programs that you've invested in. There's a value proposition of engaging a participant in that program. And then there's time saved. The cumulative value. We spoke about a specific example, which was Sarah in this case. That's just a use case. There are thousands of use cases out there. The hypothesis, or I would say the framework, is that experience is critical, that then drives engagement, and engagement is then that drives outcomes. How do we measure this? Let's start with experience. How do employees interact? Focus on benefit access, experience quality, and then benefits awareness. Are employees even aware? Whether it's through surveys, whether it's through other mediums, are employees even aware of their programs? The second piece is what actions are employees taking? Now, these actions could be, is the utilization of those programs high? Let's measure the utilization of those programs. Let's measure how many people are actually using those programs. On the enrollment and the savings side as well, as part of the benefits package, right? Like how many people are enrolling in the benefits, what percentage are enrolling on the savings behavior, and so on. And last but not the least is where is value created, which includes employee well-being, which includes productivity, and talent attraction and retention. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A, but before I do that, I want to leave you with this piece of suggestion, is we all are going to invest in employee experience initiatives over the coming years. I would encourage you to leverage a framework like this, which allows you upfront to define what the value is and then measure it on an ongoing basis. Because what you don't define, you're never going to measure, and you're never going to get the right outcomes of those initiatives. So with that, that was my close to 15 minutes. I'm going to open it up, probably 10 minutes of Q&A, and I know there's probably more questions. Or is everyone too eager to have lunch? Please.
I would have just blurted it out, but I don't think everyone would have heard me. So I love what you shared, and this framework is really helpful. How does Alight actually enable employers to get this information from associates? Because one of the challenges we're experiencing is that it does heavily rely on associates telling us the full picture of what they're experiencing, so we can provide all the necessary resources to them. And in the example you shared, some associates, even though we have a very open and caring culture, might feel nervous to share that they have caregiving responsibilities because of the perception that might lead. So how does your tool work to actually extract that information in a way that employees feel comfortable sharing to allow them to get the full benefit of what the employer is offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And I promise this is not about a sales pitch, so this is not about an organization. I'll try and be more generic about my response, right? So in some places, like the US, you get a lot more access to claims data, right? So the US is a very different beast on its own, where you get claims data, so that triggers the outreach, if that's the way we would call it. In Canada, that's why I said there's journeys that get initiated. So if we talk about journeys, you have the ability to initiate something through your platform. That could be one medium of getting to know there's an indication that the employee might be going through this journey. The other way is, as we think about the future, there's going to be, in some cases, there's going to be this AI, ChatGPT type of a concept, right? Where the employee is going to show up and the employee is going to say, this is where I need help. And we need to capture all that data in the back end in order to then do the right level of outreach. So I think it has to be done in a very subtle way. It doesn't have to be done in a creepy way that, hey, you just search this and let me now show you a couple of things, right? It's not the Instagram way of doing things, but it's we got to be more careful about it. So I feel that's the responsible version of AI that we all are working towards developing. There is not one indicator. I think there'll be a bunch of indicators. There's the human aspect as well. An employee might reach out saying, hey, what are my benefits? What are my maternity benefits? What do they look like? So that's another trigger. So when you connect the triggers, it gives you the ability then to do the outreach. But it has to be done in a very subtle way, is my point, right? It doesn't need to be at front, face, and center. Does that make sense? All right, we need more questions before lunch. Please.
Thank you. What are the top sort of benefits that you're seeing? What are most companies adding to their stack?
Yeah, let me go back to the piece around where we're seeing a lot more, and I feel that we're privileged to work both across US and Canada. So if I go back right here, I would say that in the US, there's a lot more that has already started to be that over the last couple of years that they've offered, right? And I would say one of the top ones in the US has been around navigation, because you have to connect them to the right set of doctors. Surprisingly, I've started to see some of that in Canada as well, right? Not a lot of providers, but there's second opinion. I didn't even know until recently that second opinion was something that started to be offered in Canada. That's on the physical side. Virtual healthcare, as we all know, that's picking up a lot more steam here. There is chronic condition management, whether it's diabetes, whether it's MSK. There's a lot more of that that's started to be offered here. And then when we look at some of the financial pieces, we all know, flexible saving options beyond our typical RSPs is something more that's been offered. On the mental well-being side, I think it's an evolution of EAP, is the way I look at it. It's more the providers are evolving beyond the traditional form of EAP, whether it's coaching, whether it's some amount of behavioral health that providers are providing a lot more. So, and then on the family side, we see a lot more, right? I see a couple of providers here as well on the family side. So we see a lot more of that steam picking up. Please.
Benefit to you as an organization on the data side in terms of what people are asking about by way of benefits provisions, as well as to an employer who's participating in your program. So how are you building the data into your service offering, as well as how does that benefit the employer?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, right? So when we look at the employer, that's something that we have personally I've started getting more heavily involved in, which is the analytics piece of it. So what type of analytics is available to the employer then to make better decisions? So I'll take an example, right? If I get data around specific utilization of specific programs, can I break down that based on demographics? Can I tie that back to some of the wellness piece, financial wellness surveys that are going out, right? So when we talk about data, it's important to connect different pieces of data. It's when we talk about benefits, we typically look at benefits in silos. There's health data, there's all the stuff around financial well-being, wellness, there's that data. We want to try and connect those pieces. So our intent is to provide employers with a lot more visibility into the correlation of different data sets. Say, for example, if I have a hardship on the financial side, how does that tie back to my leave duration? That's something I don't think anyone's looking at yet, especially employers are not looking at. They focus on leave, they focus on return to work, they focus on prevalence, but we need to focus on there is an impact on the financial aspect or the financial wellness aspect. So those are just some examples on the analytics side. The intent is to heavily provide employers with those analytical capabilities, because whoever the provider is, as long as the provider has that end-to-end data, that is important then to provide it back to the employer so that they can then make better decisions. It could be decisions around what do you do with future benefit planning. It could be plan design decisions and so on. It could be program decisions as well. What set of programs could probably help drive a better impact? If I see more people taking leave on a specific area, wouldn't I want to tie that back to the wellness programs that I'm providing within my organization? Hopefully that answered your question. All right, we have time for just one more. Are we good? There you go. We have one more.
Thank you. Hi. About value leakage. If we don't necessarily need to introduce new benefits, what would you say are the best strategies to raise awareness about said benefits?
Yeah, I'll list out a couple of things that organizations are doing. Now, your organization might be unique, so it could be communication, like better communication. Newsletters, we were just having a side chat with someone. Newsletters sometimes work, sometimes don't work. If it works if I have a moment of need, I'm going to read a newsletter. Sometimes I don't necessarily read a newsletter. So it's very targeted communication. If you are able to understand probably the employee population that needs that type of communication the most, I would say there's targeted communication. The other piece could be microsites. What we've seen work well is provide some specific type of microsites around total rewards and promote that on an ongoing basis. That did you know we just added content X, Y, and Z to the microsite? Instead of sending push communication, you try and have a more total rewards version of that. The other piece is technology, right? Which I think is the future, where you need to, back to the earlier point, you need to make sure that there is some intelligence within your platform. It's not just an HR portal. There's something that's happening intelligently behind the scene to surface some of that content. And then the fourth piece is, again, I don't know if your organization has a lot of HR customer care, but if they do, there is always an opportunity to promote some of that through the high-touch piece of it, which is through if someone's calling help desk, did you know you have access to all of these pieces? We've seen that as a big gap. If I call up someone, they answer my question, but they don't help me, they don't guide me on something else that's available within my organization. What I don't want to do is I don't want to go through a 40-page document to figure out what benefits I have, right? So hopefully that gives you some idea in terms of where we are seeing opportunities to drive further awareness and engagement, and that's backed by data to the extent possible. All right, thank you everyone for your time, and I'm going to be at the booth if you have any questions.